All right, looks like the recording has started. And share my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen.
No screen so far, but something is trying to appear.
Okay.
Perfect, we see it.
Okay, great. In this session, we're going to look at the benefits, commands, management, and installation of SQL Server on Linux in multiple environments. This support was added in October 2017 with the release of SQL Server 2017. We'll see some common development and DBA tasks. Then we'll review some tools that allow us to connect to SQL Server on Linux using, like SSMS plus some new ones. Then at the end, we'll have some documentation and references that you can continue learning after this presentation. So to begin, the agenda will review Linux and who developed it, how it came about, what it's used for. Then we'll see some benefits of running SQL Server on Linux. Then we'll see how Microsoft was able to be able to perform this feat by using the platform abstraction layer. Then we'll look at some Linux command lines, and then demo installing on Hyper-V, Docker, and Azure. So to begin, Linux is a free open source operating system. The little penguin in the upper right his name is Tux. He's kind of the mascot of Linux. It was developed by Linus Torvald in Helsinki, Finland. He was working under Unix at the time and was inspired to create something that was free and available for everyone. The first version was released back in 1994, so it's definitely been around for a while. The current version was released earlier this month on the 15th. It's been used in many different environments, PCs, servers, smartphones, smart TVs, as well as supercomputers. Most of the world's largest supercomputers run some form of Linux. I've listed out here some of the main distributions, and those are a distribution is the base Linux kernel, but then applied different communities have applied their own type of spin on how they want things to function. An example is Red Hat. They're definitely more enterprise grade, whereas things like Android, they're more specific to phones and tablets and portable devices. And a footprint of the internet, most servers are currently running Linux. So some of the benefits of running SQL Server on Linux is the flexibility. You can now run this on Windows operating system as well as Linux operating system. With that, it can also run in pretty much any cloud that's out there. Performance, with 2017 alone, you get a 10 10-time query speed improvement just out of the box. That improvement is also carried over to Linux, not just Windows, so it works both ways. You also have things like page level compression that allow for faster lookups. They also improve the parallel processing to make queries run even faster. Security-wise, TDE and Always Encrypt, that runs just the same on Windows and Linux. One of the big things about running SQL Server on Linux is the cost. So most Linux distributions are free, so you don't have to pay the Windows licensing costs for running this database engine. With the migration assistant, things are much easier to move around. It will not only move your tables from database to database, but also indexes and store procedures and pretty much everything. And the last one there is most capabilities are available in Linux, but there are some features that are not specifically there. One of those was the SQL Server agent. When it was first released, that was not available, but now over time they've added to it, so it's now available. But there's others that are still missing. So how Microsoft was able to achieve this was the development of platform abstraction layer. In the book listed there, the Pro SQL Server on Linux, written by Bob Ward, I've got a link to that down at the bottom, and highly recommend that book. What Microsoft was seeing was many of their customers would tell Microsoft that, hey, we've got most of our environment has been switched over to running Linux, but we still have these other servers over here that are running Windows specifically for SQL Server. Is there any way that we can get that ported over to run on Linux? And in 2011, that was when virtual machines were kind of all the rage and a hot topic. Some of the folks that were working there developed what was known as the library operating system. And that was a smaller set of components that could operate and communicate with from within the virtual machine to the host. And that kind of created the whole VM environment, and what kicked it off. Then later in 2015, some of the folks who were on the Drawbridge project back then came over to the SQL Server team and started working on Project Helsinki. And what they did was to take this even further and make what they call Pico processes, which is just the application and library components that are used to run on any type of host. And so what we've got in the image to the right is we've got SQL Server that has multiple Windows calls that go to the SQL platform abstraction layer, and then from there it reaches out, and there's only 50 calls that go out to the Linux host extension, which is that like Pico process that runs inside of the VM. And then from there, all of those get translated and actually make true Linux operating system calls. And so that's kind of, they shrunk the virtual machine concept down even further to where it's just a application that's capable of running inside of a operating system. So to go over some command lines, Kellen, she had a presentation that I've linked down below, which has the essential Linux skills for the DBA. I highly recommend if you want to deep dive into how those are run, as well as what they do. Definitely check out her slides there. It goes over, security, how to create files and directories, different text editors that are available to manage files, also different run commands, how to manage your processes, I/O, network, memory, the typical things for running SQL Server, as well as installing packages that monitor all of those. So how do we actually install SQL Server Engine? What we've been, installing on Windows, it's been download the ISO file or drop in your DVD of SQL Server and install that using a wizard. What's now is we can use these package managers for the different distributions and just tell it to do one line of code, and within a couple minutes it's downloaded, unpacked, installed, and ready to configure SQL Server. With Red Hat, the three listed here, Red Hat, SUSE, and Ubuntu, they're all pretty much the same, except for the different package managers. So you've got Yum, Zipper, and apt-get. Docker is also another platform that this can be installed in. It has a different type of command line where you just say docker pull and specify the container registry and pull down the latest 2017 version. And so in a demo, we'll see actually running that command and downloading it. Then I've got a Hyper-V set up with Ubuntu on it, and we'll install SQL Server on that. And then also I've got a Azure VM where we will connect to it and perform some operations. And then after the demos, we'll look at different ways to connect to each one of those environments. Management Studio is kind of the de facto for working with SQL Server. A new product that's available to us for free is Azure Data Studio. And then we also have BCP and SQL Command that have been used previously in Windows environments, and a new MS SQL command line interface client that is relatively new, and we'll look at that as well. And then here's some of the reference links that will be available in the slides. So with that, let's switch over to the demos. So here I'm in Visual Studio Code, where we will run Docker. So I have Docker Desktop currently installed and is running. And so from here, what we can do is say, let's Docker pull the latest Ubuntu version. So we can go into the terminal, go to PowerShell and paste that in. And what this is going to do is go out to the container registry and start downloading each layer of the image, and we'll extract and add that image to our Docker environment. And this is a fairly large download. So while this is running, we can switch over to our Hyper-V and get started on installing that. So here I've got a Hyper-V manager and a virtual machine with 4 gigs of memory, one virtual processor, and already have Ubuntu installed on it. So with that, we'll go ahead and start a new terminal, and then we'll SSH into that VM. So here we see I've logged in to Ubuntu 16.04 and currently ready to accept commands. So the first command that we want to run is import our GPG keys, which is really just a way to identify where the packages are that we're going to be using to install SQL Server. And then we add those to our package manager. That way it knows about it. And then this is the list of actual the SKUs for downloading the install files. A good way to look at that or to explain that is we can run this command here. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to be in PowerShell for that. And this will show us our lists of available installations. So see, we've got 2017 CU 8.9 as well as 2019 and all the different CTPs. So if we wanted to install one of those, we could specify it when we install. But we'll just get the latest, which is listed here. And so we will switch back to our SSH and go ahead and run sudo apt-get update. And that's just going through and making sure there's no other packages that need to be updated before running this next command. So we'll go ahead and paste that. And so what this is doing is actually going out to double check all of the other packages that are required for the package manager, and downloading any of the references that are required for installing Microsoft SQL Server. And so here now it's actually downloading the SQL Server engine. And granted, it's 178 megs, so it's not too terrible to download.
As the download is proceeding, may I ask you a question about the installation?
Yes, absolutely.
You have been able to provide the latest switch in the command to install SQL Server. So I assume that it is able to understand what distribution you are running on, and it will pick the latest that is appropriate for your particular distribution.
Yes, that's correct. So we can go ahead. I'll show you the differences here. We can go to this packages.microsoft.com and see the different distributions that are available. So here's like Red Hat, SUSE, Fedora, but in my example there, shrink this some. You see Ubuntu, and then the version is selected there. So we're specifying for our package repository that we want to use this distribution and then this specific version. If we go into, say, Ubuntu, see we can have installations from any version.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So now that has downloaded, extracted, and actually installed a whole bunch of libraries that are required for SQL Server to run. And then we get this nice message that says we need to complete the setup of Microsoft SQL Server by running this command. So we'll go ahead and run that. And what this says is similar to what we see in other environment or installations is, do we want an evaluation, developer, express, or paid versions? Since this is just a demo, we'll select 2 for the developer edition. And then it asks us, do we want to accept the license terms that go with running SQL Server? We can just type yes, and then enter the password for SA. And then it will go out and configure SQL Server, set the licensing agreement, as well as the SA account. And it has been successfully installed, and SQL Server is now starting. We can check that by using the system control status. And we see that, yep, here's Microsoft SQL Server database engine, and it started 13 seconds ago. So we currently have SQL Server running on a Linux environment. So another thing we can do is allow port 1433 to be exposed. So we can tell the firewall to be go ahead and enable the firewall, and then allow the 1433 port to be open. But so now we just have the engine running and not any tools or anything that we can use to connect to it. So in order to do that, we need to specify a uh, um, a different um, directory for downloading those extra tools. And in order to do that, we need to add it to our repository list of what's available for downloading. And then once we have that, we need to run a apt-get update to make sure that nothing else needs to be updated in the process. And now we can install our Microsoft tools, command line tools specifically. So it's just saying this is going to download 1100 kilobytes. Do we want to continue? We'll just say yes. And then here it's asking, do we also agree to the license terms that are listed here at these URLs? We'll just say yes. And then it will ask us again, clicking yes, you accept these terms and licenses. We'll say yes. And there we have it. Now we have our tools installed and ready for use. One thing that we can do is make sure that we add the location of our tools to our path. That way, no matter where we are in the Linux environment, we can always reference back to these commands or these tools. So we'll go ahead and select that and paste that in. And now we should be able to connect to this. So one way using the SQL command, we'll go ahead and paste that and then type in our SA password, and now we are currently connected to a SQL SQL environment. So we'll say SQL version or select version and go, and here we see we've got SQL Server 2017 running on Developer Edition, running on Ubuntu. So that's how it gets installed.
We were muted, but we were applauding in the background, Lucas.
Nice. Yes. Thank you. So let's switch back over to our original one and check to make sure that Docker has fully installed. Okay. Looks like all those pulls were completed and is available for us. One of the nice things about Visual Studio Code is all the different extensions, and one of those is Docker. So here we see, here's that Microsoft SQL Server 2017 ready for us to run. So let's go back up and grab this command. And so what we're going to do is tell Docker to go ahead and spin up that image that we just downloaded, accept the EULA, and expose the port 1433. That way we can access it. So we'll go ahead and copy that and paste. And now if we refresh this, we see we've got the container that has SQL Server running in it. So to now that we've got all of this installed and ready to go, let's switch back over to our SSH and create the database or create a database. So what we want is we'll create a test database. We'll select the name and make sure that it gets created. So here now we've got a test database inside of our Hyper-V instance. So now let's switch over and use the test database, and then we will create a new table called SQL Saturday and hit go. So now we're in the instance of in that database, and now created that table. So now we can insert some data. So just inserted 21 records, and then we can select star from SQL Saturday and hit go, and there we have a listing of all of the most recent upcoming SQL Saturdays and some previous ones, their IDs and event times. So that's how we can, that's definitely a easy way of creating tables. It's the same type of commands that we would use in any other tool set. So with that, we'll go ahead and quit in there. And now let's switch over to so we're back in the Hyper-V. I need to know what is the IP address that has been assigned to this one. And so here we have 192 that we will use to connect. So let's open up Azure Data Studio and resize this a bit. And so we want to add another connection, and we'll say 192, 168, 86, and 170, and we'll give it the we also need to log into this using SA. So we'll connect to that. Oh, that's right, there's a super strong password that was used. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I typed it wrong. There we go. And so here, in that Hyper-V instance, we have Developer Edition 1403 on Ubuntu, and here's our test database that we created. So we can go in there and we see, yep, here's our SQL Saturday table, and we can select the top 1,000, and there we go. We have all of that data available to us in Data Studio. For connecting to our Docker container, what it does is actually will spin up and expose the local instance. So we can just say dot SA, and in that demo, here's the super strong password that I was thinking about for SA, and connect to it. And so here we've got this running in Docker, which is also an Ubuntu version. With that, I'll show you, I've got a Linux VM running. It's running in the central US. It's also Ubuntu. It's got 2 CPUs and 8 gig of memory. And here's the public IP address. And just to confirm that, 52.17.193.103. Okay, so here we're in Azure Data Studio, and we can connect to the Azure VM, our Hyper-V instance and our Docker instance. So what we need to do now is, well, we need to have this test database, available in our Azure VM instance. So what we can do is say a new query, and we will want to run, we're going to back up this database to blob storage. So here I've got a credential that we need to create to have access to that blob storage. So we'll go ahead and run that. Next, we can back it up to that blob container. We'll go ahead and run that. Okay. I apologize for that error. I'm not sure why it's saying that. So, geez, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that would actually back this up to our blob container that's part of the VM, which should have been loaded up here, and then we could restore it to the Azure VM instance with a similar, the same type of command that you would use to restore a database. So I guess another tool that we can look at is the Microsoft SQL Server command line. We're here in our Hyper-V instance, and we'll go ahead and update our package. And make sure we, this is a Python application, and so we need to have Python and its package installer updated and available, so that we can install this this version of command line tools. And this tool is fairly new to me, but I really enjoy it. I will probably be using it more, but it's also available for Windows editions as well. You can connect to any type of version that you want. Any questions while this is downloading?
In terms of the functionality of the database engine that is running on Linux, are you aware of any differences in behavior or any functional types of changes that one should anticipate if they are considering porting, let's say, a database to run on a Linux hosted instance of SQL Server?
Okay, right. For the database engine, I do not see anything out of the ordinary. Most of the engine capabilities are available. One area that I do know is lacking is in the integration services. The SSIS catalog is not available, and so you can only run packages and a specific amount of tasks and components can be utilized to run as just from the file system instead of from the catalog.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'm interested in checking out is column store indexing. How is that, the performance between Windows and Linux? Is it going to be very similar, or will it be hardware dependent? And just testing that out is something I'm looking into doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question about the SQL Server agent. Can you run PowerShell scripts or any other kind of scripting from the agent using that SQL file?
Gotcha. I believe that you can run PowerShell. Let me. I'm sorry. Let's actually install agent and see if. Shoot. I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and install agent and see if that's possible. Install Linux. I can't remember the specific. There it is. We want to enable agent. And then system restart. Okay. And so now with in the Hyper-V instance, we can go in here. Let's refresh that. And SQL agent. There's no jobs right now, but we can create a new one. Test for now. And steps.
You can click on new step.
Yeah, new step and transact. Yep, you've got PowerShell.
Sweet.
Yes.
And one last thing, I'm going to go on mute after this. You might want to add ZFS testing to your list of things to get to at some point, because that there are some really cool stuff with caching and using different speeds of disks for different layers of storage within a transparent RAID array. So that might be something cool to look into.
Yep, I agree. I have made note of that. Thank you. So let's see. We were back at installing the Microsoft command line. Well, it doesn't seem to be wanting to install that. Python is there. All right. Dang on. Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. It doesn't seem to want to install that. So let's it is actually quite nice because you have. Here we go. Here we go. So the nice thing about this tool is when you start typing, even though it's command line prompt, you get a like IntelliSense for you built right in. So you can say select, listing of tables or star from, and then it'll know all of the keywords.
That's a great help, and impressive to see that in a command line tool.
Yes, yeah, that is something very, very nice to see, and plus it formats it very nice for in a tabular format like that, and gives you the time that it took to run that query.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to display execution plans from the CLI, or is that only available in like SSMS?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm making a note of that though, because that would be pretty interesting. I'm sure you could get the XML version, but not the nice graphical interface version.
Right, right.
So let's actually create another database and table on our Azure version. New Data Studio and a new query in our Azure instance. Go ahead and run that. So here's our data that we just inserted on SQL Server 2019 developer. Oh, come on Linux. So, that's pretty much it on the demos. I'll definitely look at the execution plans and the ZFS file system to see about the different capabilities with RAID and the performance between those. But other than that, that's it.
That's a great presentation and a great set of demos, Lucas. Thank you so much for preparing that and sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, dude, that was awesome.
Yeah, thanks.